All right, here we go. Back on the Gill Connections podcast. So happy, so proud that you would press play today, man. I've never taken it for granted the thousands and thousands of people that listen here and how you keep coming back every week, every episode. I know it's not for me, and you can hear it in my voice. I know it's not here for this voice. I got a little bit of a allergy going on, so I'm gonna talk very little today. I'm gonna let our guest just talk it all because he's done well. I almost said he's done it all, but I know he would correct me if I said that. So I'm excited and grateful that you're here today. So help me welcome today's guest, man. This is a good one. We kind of did a pre-interview once a few months ago, and honestly, we just had a blast. So we had to get it on wax, had to actually record it. Help me welcome the VP of Performance from Altis. And we're certainly going to talk about Altis because of what they're doing in our sport. It's a lot of good things. Help me welcome the wise, the wonderful Mr. Andreas Behm. Andreas, how are you, sir?
Mike, I'm great. Thanks for having me on. This is definitely long overdue,
Absolutely.
especially after our pre-chat in Atlanta a couple months ago. And yeah, we both were like, man, we should have just brought a mic and pressed record right here. So we're rehashing a conversation, and yeah, looking forward to it. This is going to be fun.
And I know you would have corrected me if I said you've done it all because I know your competitive spirit. You'd be like, "Oh no, bro, there's so much more to go," and that's what I love about your competitive spirit, man.
There's always more to go, and I definitely haven't done it all. So I'm just working my way through, whatever comes next.
I love it. I love it. Well, I want to hop right into it, man, because you mentioned we did meet a few months ago. We were at a coffee shop and really just got to sit down and just kind of be two dudes and just talking, man, getting to know each other's past. We've known each other through different places that we worked and through different workings with Gill and Altus and things like that, but never actually got to know like you, like what is your story? What do you do? How'd you get to where you are? And I just found it fascinating, man. And I'm just really excited to share that journey. So I just want to kind of hop right into it. My first question is pretty much kind of my standard first question is where does track and field start for you? Where does that start?
Well, really, track and field starts as a bit of a coincidence, to be honest. It definitely starts with a love for sport, but track and field was never really in the plans,
Hmm.
if you so will. Grew up in Europe, so Spain and Germany. My dad is German, and my mom is American. She's from the Philly area. So I grew up, yeah, Spain and Germany with parents from two different countries. So pretty international and culturally diverse upbringing. And even from a young age, I always loved sport, but I was more into basketball and American football and tennis and soccer. I grew up playing soccer and tennis, and I knew I always wanted to work in sport. But I thought I wanted to be like work in a front office, like be a general manager, basically assemble a team, a coaching staff, evaluate talent, all those good things. And so I went to high school in Germany, and after high school, decided to study sports in the US.
Well, okay, so say in high school for a second, then did
Mhm.
you it's funny that you said American football, by the way, because we always, generalizing, we always think of other countries as American football doesn't even exist. It's football, it's soccer, and certainly the NFL is changing that with a lot of games going on overseas now, and they want to. I just read something where they want to try to get like 16 games a year outside of the U.S. with their new bargaining agreement. So tennis and soccer and things like that. Did you play sports through high school, or were you just more thinking of like that general manager type of participation, if you will.
No, I played sports, but it's very different in Europe. It's not in a high school setting, it's more a complete club structure.
Mm-hmm.
So there are no high school sports or activities in school in Germany.
Like
And
none, like zero.
yeah, pretty much none. I mean, you
Wow.
basically go to school from 8:30 in the morning till, 4 to 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And then
Hmm.
you go home and you get to do homework and then you have to find time to do other activities. So
So
yeah,
did
it's
you
very, very
did you
academically focused and
did you do any club track or other sports?
no, never any track really. Like
Really?
the most exposure I had to track was maybe a couple units in PE. And what I will say drove me the general manager route fairly quickly was that I very early on in my life realized that I was pretty average at everything. I like to think I wasn't completely horrible or useless, but I was decidedly average, and there were a lot of athletes that were so much better than I was, and I could see the writing on the wall pretty early. So if I was
I
going
love
to
that.
work in sport, it certainly wasn't as a professional athlete.
Yeah, yeah. That's great. Did you? I love that. I thought I was going to be good, but I also was average to below average. But I still thought maybe I could, maybe I was a late bloomer. I'm still waiting to bloom, I think is what's happening. What about, so you're not playing, you're not doing track, anything like that. It's in high school, but like, do you have like, are you like at the front edge of your couch watching the Olympics? Like, is track anywhere in your head, or is it just sports in general?
It's really more sports in general. Like I would definitely follow the Olympics, and so I was aware of track and field, but it was
Okay.
more of a like smaller interest. Like what I would do, because I grew up in Frankfurt, Germany, we had access to the called AFN, the Armed Forces Network.
Hmm.
And so um, while other kids my age maybe were going out and partying, I would get up in the middle of the night at like 2 or 3 a.m. Because of the time difference to tune into NBA and NFL games. And I would watch those like religiously. And then I would,
Wow.
get USA Today's, which you could also get and pull over the stats and see how people did. Um, lifelong, lifelong Eagles, Sixers, and Phillies fan. So go Philly teams. But yeah, always followed that. And so that really was my interest in sports when it came to watching.
Okay. Oh, wow, that's amazing. Okay, so we got this picture of track. A good number. We're learning there is certainly not one common route to becoming a track coach. That we've thrown that out a long time ago. But most of our track coaches, I would say a majority, have some kind of kindling of track as a kid. They watched Carl Lewis in the 100 and was like, "Oh, this is my sport," or they did multiple sports, but gravitated towards track. Track is really not in your headspace at this point, but sports is, and Philly sports. I love that is in your forefront. Okay, now out of high school, you're going to college, and you're thinking about studying and pursuing.
Yeah, pursuing sport management, right?
Okay,
If I could, yeah, if I was a kid, if I could have been an athlete, I would have been Allen Iverson. That's to this
yeah,
day my all-time favorite athlete.
nice.
So I wanted to be AI so bad. Once again, I was very average to mediocre, but that was like my sports idol growing up. So yeah, I found my way to the University of Tennessee. Never
Uh,
been there before,
So
had no,
how does a kid I'm always amazed when a kid from California makes it to Tennessee. How does
yeah.
a kid in Germany make it to Tennessee?
Well, I wanted to study sport. And it just so happened that the University of Tennessee had won the football national championship the year before. T. Martin, Peerless Price,
Yes.
that entire squad. So, me knowing nothing about Tennessee, having never been to the southern United States, in the dawning of the internet, I was able to apply because I thought, well, if they won the football national title, they must be pretty good at sports.
Wow.
And so, yeah, I ended up, going overseas, 19 years old, University of Tennessee, studying sport management.
You had no you could probably, I mean, you're a smart guy, so this is going to be a little oversimplification, but you probably couldn't have picked Knoxville out of a map, for crying out loud. So you had no clue about Southern food, sweet tea, accent. Well, you knew about accents, but you just had no clue. They won the national title and was like, well, they must be good in sports, and that's what I want to do. So let's go there.
Correct, pretty much.
Wow. So you go there and you study sports management.
Yep, I go there and I study sport management, which, yeah, was a lot of fun. But along the way, with my goal of becoming a general manager in mind, I realized that I needed to be able to identify and evaluate talent.
Mm-hmm.
And in my simple logic, I thought, what better way to understand and evaluate talent than being able to understand speed, running, and jumping, the most basic motor functions that
Interesting.
a human displays that basically carry over to most any sport. And so I thought it would be a great idea to volunteer my time with the track and field team because that's where I would be able to at least understand these tenets.
Do,
And
do,
so, no pun intended, I volunteered with the Tennessee Lady Vols track team.
do you it's interesting that obviously the majority of people listening are track coaches and track related, so when you say that, I'm sure we were all nodding our head like, of course, yeah, if you want to evaluate, you of course you would go to track and field. But you're not coming from the track side, but you're also not coming from what I'll call the American side, meaning like, oh, college football, like, those are big sports. Like, uh do you think not have like you had a maybe a more diverse, like you weren't 100% into college football and football like maybe a lot of us in the US growing up are. Do you think that kind of diversification helped you boil it down and see the fundamentals, which is, I mean, you nailed it with track and field. I mean, I feel like if the same story was being told, but it was a kid out of Miami or Dallas or Philly, and they go to Tennessee because they won the college football, and they would have said, yeah, so I wanted to evaluate talent, so I went and volunteered for the football team or the basketball team. That's what they would have said. Maybe they had gotten down to the baseball team, but you nailed it by doing track, even though you didn't have a track background.
I can't really recollect where that thought process came from, to be honest with you.
Mhm.
So it just seemed fairly evident to me that track was kind of the connecting point to a lot of different sports.
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean that was kind of the thought of a 19-year-old kid, you know.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
um,
Okay. So you volunteer with the Lady Vols there. How does that conversation go down? Because again, you're not coming from like, oh, I worked with the best German track coach. You're, I'm gonna say this a little rudely since I know you well enough. I know you won't take offense to this.
hit
You're
me
a nobody in track and field. So why
for sure.
does the Lady Vols say, sure, you can help out? Well, how does this conversation go down?
So I think it was actually facilitated through one of my advisors at the end. Once I kind of explained what I wanted to do, Buck Jones, who was amazing at running the sport, being a part of the sport management department at Tennessee. He was also heavily involved in track, and he was also, I believe, the longtime announcer at volunteer track and field meets.
Okay.
And so I think he made an introduction. And really, the idea of volunteering wasn't to come in and coach. It was basically, you know, I'll carry equipment, I'll video whatever you need to.
Okay.
And, with the opportunity to kind of observe and absorb along the way, right? So it wasn't that I was going in there to coach, it was there that I was going in to like do grunt work and get the opportunity to observe and learn. And I must have done an okay job because after a semester, then they hired me as a actual team manager, which was great, which helped out a lot with school finances and whatnot. So yeah, so that's kind of how that started. It wasn't even to coach, it was just to kind of learn and observe. And that's where I really got my first kind of foray into track and field and kind of seeing that I kind of liked it. It was, it's very personal. Um, there's a lot of combination of art and science and movement intricacy. So yeah, I don't think I expected to like it as much as I did.
Hmm.
When I initially did it, I think it was more means to an end as opposed to, potentially a pathway or a, professional journey.
But first of all, a great distinction of that you were volunteering not as, hey, I want to become a coach, so can I come volunteer and help do workouts? You were like, hey, I just want to come observe, and so I know I can't do that for free, so I'll set up whatever you need. You just tell me what to do, and I'll do it. But I ain't even trying to become a track coach necessarily. So that's a good distinction. So where does maybe it doesn't happen at Tennessee during this, call it volunteer, and then they hired you on as a team manager. Did it ever, I mean, obviously it did, but where does the click happen of like, oh, I want to be sports manager, I want to help build a team and evaluate talent, to I want to coach this, like that's sport, but it's different, it's not front office, it's in the muck coaching. Where does that click, that change happen?
Well, the change really happens a couple steps further down the line,
Okay.
to be sure, because I did pursue the idea of potentially working in a front office for more years.
Okay.
And really, the click, I would say, happened, Tennessee was my undergrad. The click really happened at the conclusion of graduate school for me.
Was that at Tennessee?
No, so apparently I like the theme of Orange and UT because after the University of Tennessee, I went to the University of Texas for grad school.
Okay, let's stay at Tennessee for a second. That's funny. You're just hitting all the UTs, right? Maybe
Mhm.
Toledo is after that or something. Um, so you continue on as manager for the Lady Vols. This was back when Tennessee was separated, I believe. In fact, I think they were the longest, the latest to change. They had a totally separate men's athletic department and totally separate women's athletic department, not just women's staff and a men's staff on track. They actually, I believe, had separate athletic departments for quite a while. Um, do you get more ingrained from your team manager spot into coaching? Like, did you start helping out with workouts, or did that whole time at Tennessee is I'm setting stuff up, I'm moving equipment left and right?
Well, I think that the 2 points where I did get more involved in coaching at Tennessee, um, one was more practical, and the other was maybe a little bit more on the interest side of things. Um, the first was I did get to help out a little bit with the post grad group that the Lady Vols had. So, I would come out. My main job was to help the team, obviously, the university team, but then I was able to come out and help the post grad group a little bit. And that was sometimes just timing workouts and
Hmm.
again, just videoing and observing and almost being just like another point of contact, which was very enjoyable because it was kind of, it was very personable. So from that standpoint, it was great. A little more theoretical was observing the men's team, to be honest, because the
Hmm.
men's team was amazing. They won national titles while I was, present. And, I keep in touch with some of those guys to this day. Obviously, Vince Anderson was the coach there at that point, and he's obviously one of the most influential people in my development period, as we'll come to see here in a little bit. But yeah, I came in, I think, the same year as Justin Gatlin. So, Justin and I have kind of, known each other since I think we were both freshmen.
Hmm.
I might be a year off, but I think we were both freshmen at the same time at Tennessee. And yeah, so I think from that standpoint, I also got to see what true speed really looks like because they had some really fast guys, right? They had
Right.
Gatlin, they had Sean Lambert, they
Hmm.
had Leonard Scott,
Yeah.
Dwayne Wallace. I remember Lawrence Johnson, the pole vaulter, was training there, and I would talk, him and Tim Mack were both there at the same time. So I also got a really good foundational pole vault education because I'd get to observe them as well. But I remember one time Lojo came out and he was just doing some hurdle hops and got like, I don't know, 6 to 8 hurdles and he raised them all up to 42 inches. And then he dislodged it to be able to raise them even higher and just bounced over them as if it was nothing. I think my
Wow.
jaw hit the floor. I'd never seen anything like that. So total athletic freak show. Um,
I was gonna say athlete's gonna athlete.
Athletes definitely are going to athlete.
you,
So
you you mentioned Vince, and I can't listen to Vince without immediately wanting to rush out to the track and coach. Like he's always on and so motivational and so like I can understand when he's speaking. Like I understand what he's trying to convey. Like I don't have to be a genius. Like he speaks very. He's a good teacher. Essentially, is what I'm trying to get at. Did you? So you got to observe and help and things like that. And you said he's a big part of your life. Is this the start of like were you like looking at him and maybe vice versa? Maybe there's some symbiotic relationship there of like, oh, what's this guy do for a living? This guy gets paid. Like this is a job. Because sometimes we don't think when we're coming through the athletic side that coaches are actually like a job you can pursue. We're supposed to go become business owners and doctors and lawyers and all those kind of things. And quite often we hear the story of like somehow it's like, wait a minute, like in this case, like Vince, he's having a lot of fun, and oh wait a minute, he does get paid. Like oh well, maybe I could be that. Was this a moment of like oh I could be this, or was this still just another part of the puzzle of a sports management portfolio that you're putting together?
hard to say. I really think at that point it was more possibly a subconscious seed was planted.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Um, but again, like Vince and I, we talked a decent amount, but again, since the programs were separate, I never had full interaction with him per se, right? Even though, we talked a lot with the guys team and everything.
mm-hmm,
But
mm-hmm.
yeah, look, man, Vince, listen, you're spot on about Vince. When he talks, and I didn't come up with this, someone else said this, it's like a combination of football coach and preacher. Like
Yes,
everything he
yes,
says comes from like the depths of his soul. It is just captivating, right? Like you
yes,
can't
yes,
help
yes.
but pay attention. So it's an amazing talent, skill. I don't know exactly what to
It
call it, but
it's a culture. Yeah,
yes, for
10,
sure.
10 years ago, I heard him speak at some clinic. So I had been out of coaching for 10 years at this point. And I remember after he gets done, I go up to him and I was like, I haven't coached in 10 years, Vince. I want to go coach someone right now. Like, let's go get in the blocks with somebody. Like, it just, he's so, I can't imagine. I've never seen him work with an athlete, but I can only imagine there's more of that passion. But him towards coaches, like he is such a great coach of coaches in that aspect. So I could just imagine being a 20, 21 year old and just kind of you're a smart guy. You come, I think when we talked previously, you come from a fairly high academic culture for your family. Like that was a big part of your parents to you, and so like you just kind of soaking everything in and just like here's this crazy guy, going off at practice. And I mean that in a good way. And like, oh, wait a minute. This is not only am I learning, but it's kind of fun too. He put some fun in there.
Yeah, well, you can decide for yourself. I'm definitely very well educated, I like to think.
Yes.
Whether I'm smart or not, you can determine for yourself.
Stop,
Those
stop, stop, stop.
those might be two separate things. But yeah, I mean, look, Vince, but Vince is like that 24/7. Like it's not just with coaches on the track.
Yeah.
Like Vince could explain to you how to cut your lawn, how to mow your lawn, and he would bring the same passion, enthusiasm, and intensity to that and just have you riveted.
I'm going to
So
start a new podcast. It's just Vince. And it's going to be the topic of the week. And it's going to be nothing that's track. It's going to be, hey, Vince, tell us how to cut grass. I'm just gonna let him go for 30 minutes, and then I'm like, "Hey, how would you sort your garbage and recycling?" He would be so intense and awesome.
perfect, and people would love it. So
That'd be great. Thanks for that new show idea. I'm gonna remember that. All right. So undergrad, University of Tennessee. What a great time. I mean, there's a lot of great times at Tennessee, but man, fellow friend Justin Gatlin and those guys, man, they're just amazing. They did an amazing job. You get that undergrad degree, but you're still not. I'm still not hearing like, yeah, Mike, all right, I'm gonna become a coach. You're still in this sports management. And so again, academics is a big important part of your family and family's culture. So now you're going to go to grad school. How did you get to Texas? How did there's a lot of grad schools out there.
well, I went back to Europe for a little bit to kind of assess my options.
Did Texas win
And
the football championship? Is that what you're about to tell me? And that's why you went
no,
there?
they did not.
Okay, all right,
They
just
did
checking,
not.
just checking.
They did not. But so I went back to Europe, and I actually also at that point continued with the theme of educating myself on movement, and basically helped out at the Eintracht Frankfurt, which is the local kind of big club in town with their track team. And so I basically helped out with the multi-eventers. So I learned a lot about, kind of structuring workouts and, um, you know, basically conquering different types of events in a, condensed time period. Because obviously, if you're a multi-eventer,
Mhm.
you only have so much time to spend on any given task. And, so then I was evaluating my grad school options and yeah, settled on the University of Texas because they did have a good sport management graduate program. Honestly, felt like I didn't really learn that much at the University of Tennessee
Mhm.
from a sport management standpoint. So I felt like I needed further education on that.
Mhm.
And so I looked at different options. Like I considered other schools. Like I looked at the University of Minnesota, and then I read that they have in the winter it gets so cold that they have underground tunnels connecting the parking lot to the classrooms. And I was immediately like, nope, not happening. Too cold. Forget that. So yeah, settled on the University of Texas. Austin seemed like a cool spot. Again, Longhorns, they had a powerhouse athletic department. So, I was hoping to get involved there as well, but obviously had no promise or, guarantee that that would happen. So once again, packed my stuff up and moved to a new state. Again, same as Tennessee, never set foot in Texas before, never, didn't know anyone in this entire state, right? So off we go, new adventure, graduate school.
How do this isn't necessarily track coach related, but like that attitude. like I share a similar attitude of like I moved to a lot of places by myself for the first time, not know anybody, those kind of things. And um it started, I was forced as a kid. We moved a lot when I was a kid. Like we my wife and I counted it up one day, just kind of just quickly going like kindergarten through high school. I was in the same high school all 4 years, but kindergarten through eighth grade, I was at 20 different schools. So if you do the math, on average, I was two schools a year, and a lot of times I was three schools. So I was always the new guy, the new kid, right? And so I kind of grew up new, and I had to find my way of what's that mean. Not everybody has that though, and no judgment, by the way, on either side. Some people, I've got kids that I graduated high school from with that are still in the same town, and they're doing great. They're business owners and things like that. But there's no like I'll just pick up and move to Chicago. I'll pick up and move to Austin. Where does that come from you? That takes a special self-confidence, if you will. Where do you think that comes from you?
Well, I think the example was set by my parents. My mom, obviously American, she's now lived in Europe for 40 plus years, and she went over to Europe to pursue different opportunities. I think during college, my dad is or was, he's retired now. He was a journalist, and so he traveled the world for different political reporting, cultural
Mm,
reporting. So I think travel and being flexible and culturally open-minded was, instilled in me through my parents more than anything, right? I also grew up in a city, and went to inner city public school, and
mhm,
we had I had friends from all kinds of different backgrounds, right?
mhm.
So very multicultural again. So, you kind of get to understand and navigate people, if you so will, and learn to
Yeah,
meet
yeah.
them where they're at and understand that there are certain differences that you need to respect, but also
Mhm,
other differences that you can, that are advantageous to connecting with someone.
mhm.
And then sometimes differences are celebrated.
Right.
You don't have to, it doesn't have to be homogenous, right? So
Yeah.
I think from that standpoint, and I'd been to the States quite a bit as a kid. I've gone to, Philadelphia area during
Mhm.
the summer times with my mother, for summer break and all that stuff. So I think traveling was pretty natural. And again, we
Okay.
travel a lot throughout Europe. So I think that
Yeah.
came pretty naturally to me just by, the upbringing and the way my parents kind of viewed the world.
Yeah, I think that's an advantage when you can meet other people that are different than you and live differently than you and have grown up differently than you. I think that's I don't know. For me, my experience would be that has helped me to be better understanding of more things that I don't understand, that I don't have to immediately not understand them and automatically think that's a bad thing. So it was just interesting. You're just, moving around. And like you said, when you said I knew no one in Texas, and it's like, well, that's a big state. That's hard not to know anybody in Texas for people who are here in the US. And it's like, wow, that's right. You didn't know anybody. I mean, you're still a pup in this game in regards to, network here in the US. Okay, so you're in Austin. You're right. Very cool town, right? It was cool back then, and it's kept its coolness. That's a pretty cool town. But you're going there for grad work. How do you? Maybe kind of two questions. I'm assuming you went and started helping out with the track team in some form or fashion. But did you ever consider? Because you're not necessarily a track guy at this point. I'm getting. Did you think of any? Did you think of diversifying when you got to Texas? Like, oh, maybe now I should go work with the baseball team or the football team or tennis or whatever. Did you think about that at all, or how did that come about at UT Austin?
No, not really, because I think the general idea was still, I was still trying to understand basic movement
Hmm.
at its fundamental level. And I will say, one thing I didn't understand what kinesiology was.
Hmm.
So in hindsight, as an undergrad, maybe I should have studied kinesiology. I did try to study kinesiology. I asked if I could study kinesiology at Texas, and they said I could, but I would need to knock out so many prerequisites that I just simply didn't have that, I would have almost had to do another undergrad degree all over. So sport management it was, but I had a couple electives, so I got to take some kinesiology classes. But yeah, it was basically after understanding movement
Okay.
more than anything. So what I really did is once I got there, I just started emailing the track coaches. I had no idea who any of them were, no clue. And so since I worked for the Lady Vols, the first person I messaged was Bev Kearney.
Hmm.
And so Bev, yeah, wrote me back, said, well, I don't know, we may, I don't know if we need any help, but why don't you just swing by the office and we'll chat. And I ended up chatting with then Dana Boone was an assistant there, right?
Oh,
Love
nice.
Dana. Dana's
Yes,
awesome.
yes,
And
yes.
so, but at that time I kind of said, I'd like to come out and help, and basically the same thing I did at Tennessee. And like, well, we already have a couple team managers, so I don't really know if we need the help, but I'll keep you, I'll keep your, whatever, I'll keep you in mind
Right.
should something pop up. And I was like, okay, that's fair enough. I definitely appreciated them even, responding and taking the
Yeah.
time to talk to me, which was great. So, and I think a couple weeks passed, and yeah, one of the, again, split programs by sheer coincidence, right?
Hmm.
Also, I had no understanding of combined versus, well, I kind of did at that point from Tennessee, but again, by sheer coincidence, a split program. And then a couple weeks later, some guy named Dan Pfaff emailed me, and I was like, oh, cool.
And you had
Um,
no clue because you didn't have a clue who Vince Anderson was either.
nope, I no,
Wow.
didn't really. So, when I looked at his resume, I was like, he sounds pretty good. This guy sounds like he's pretty good. And so he's like, hey, well, I'll be in the office at this time. Why don't you just swing by? And so, I went back to the Texas track offices and sat down and met Dan. And I thought it would be similar to the conversation I had with the Lady Longhorn staff. It'd probably be a 5 to 10 minute chat. And yeah, let's see. Well, Dan and I ended up talking for 2 hours, right? Hit it off immediately. I think me being part German intrigued him because obviously his roots are German as well.
Right, right.
So, we talked a lot about Germany and German history and other things of that nature. And yeah, at the end of the conversation, he's like, well, track practice doesn't start for like another 2 weeks, but if you're really serious, come out on this day at this time. And yeah, you can just kind of hang out and help us out and watch us. And so that's really how it started, right?
And
So
still not as a track coach though, right? Just more
correct. It was,
okay.
yeah, and but Dan really gave me, Dan gave me like small assignments, right? Like I would help with the general strength. I would kind of, help him set up workouts, which again is very beneficial. Like even just setting up the workout,
Yeah,
you
that's
kind
a
of
good
have an
point.
understanding of what the workout entails for the day and what the expectations are.
Right.
So, other different things. And then he would just gradually expand my duties. And Dan was the field events coach, right? So he'd coach all the jumps, all the multis, all the throws, the pole vault. And, like there'd be times Dan would like feedback on stuff and I'd be like, what the hell? Like, I don't even think he was watching. Like, how did he even see that? Right. So I quickly realized the intricacy of kind of movement. And Dan had like a vast library of, so he was always
Yeah.
in his office just reading and reading and reading.
Mhm.
And that really intrigued me because it was clearly a profession, um, that involved continued study and lifelong learning, which I
Mhm.
think was also, kind of intriguing to me. It wasn't just something that you got good at and then you just did it the rest of your life. There was constant self-improvement and challenge that went along with, becoming a better and better coach. So yeah, I
Yeah.
spent the first year of grad school with Dan, just following him
Wow.
around. I had a notebook. I wrote everything down that he said. And oftentimes I'd write it down and be like, I have no idea what he just said, but I'll write it down. And hopefully, like in 3 to 4 years, when I open this notebook again, I'll look at it and be like, oh, that's what he was talking about. I get it now. So
Dude, what's striking is that you have no idea. You have two gentlemen in a row with a Vince to a Dan here now that, a lot of people would rightfully so put on their Mount Rushmore of specifically sprints and hurdles, but although, you mentioned with Dan coaching a lot of things, of course, but would put on their coaching Mount Rushmore, and you just, I don't want to say you just happen to be around them and learning from them. It's just striking that like there'd be a lot of people right now that would pay money to go follow Dan Pfaff around for weeks at a time, right? And your front row seat, writing it all down. I love that. That's interesting. Writing down the things that he says, even the ones you don't even understand. You're like, all right, well, maybe one day I'll know what this means. That's it. So you had no, I don't get the sense that you have any like understanding of the unique position that you're in.
well, at the time I did not.
Hmm.
at a later point in time, obviously, it became fairly clear. But the best way someone ever described it was Boo Schexnayder. Once I kind of told him my background, he just basically, in typical Boo fashion, just said, "Oh, so you just basically never picked up any bad habits." And I
Love
was like,
that.
"Well, I guess that's a way of putting it, right?"
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I think, and this will be a continuing theme throughout,
Hmm.
our chat, is that I wholeheartedly, realize, acknowledge, and am grateful for that I am a product of mentorship, right?
Hmm.
And I've
Hmm.
had a lot of people, a lot of coaches pour into me to allow me to grow as a coach.
So grad school's 2 years. Did you spend all 2 years with Dan?
I did not, because after the first year, Dan decided to leave and
Mm.
he took another job with. So, and in came one of Dan's former athletes and disciples, Mario Satania.
Oh, geez.
I was then fortunate enough to spend the second year with, and
Nice.
Mario was great because he basically ran a similar system to Dan.
Right.
Um, but he was sometimes he was well he was let's put it this way, he was more direct and
Mm.
sometimes less cryptic than Dan. So he
Mm.
basically helped translate a lot of what I had kind of learned with
Right.
Dan into a more digestible format for me.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah. And I find that so quick shout out. There's because sometimes we have first time listeners. We're going to definitely have first time listeners here in this episode. One, we mentioned Justin Gatlin. I have to shout out. He's got a great podcast. If you love podcasts, you're listening to this one, so maybe possibly you do. Ready, Set, Go. You can find it on the
for
same
sure.
podcast that they're using right now. Go check him out. They do it's a unique. It's not what you're listening to now, but I'll tell you the insights from Justin and the Bearded Wonder, his co-host, is just I love it. He does a great job. So go listen to that. And then we mentioned three people so far in this journey that also have their own Gill Connections podcast episode that you got to go check out. So Dana Boone, current head coach of the University of Central Florida, you got to go listen to her. Her story is amazing. Dan Pfaff, I was so honored to be able to sit down and really just a little bit to how I'm picturing you, just back away and just listen. I mean, his journey and how he got into coaching, so unique and so amazing. And then my personal mentor for coaching track and field, Schexnayder, are still our number one most listened to episode out there. And so just encourage you to go listen to those gentlemen's and those ladies' stories out there, because it's amazing. They're unique, and it'll make you better. Okay, so you downgrade, and that's an air quote here, from Dan to Mario, who's amazing.
Those are your words, not
That's
mine,
what I'm
man.
saying.
Mario, I did not say those things.
He'll come.
That's all Mike.
He could
You
call
can
me
go
right
after
now. He
Mike.
knows that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
All
I
right.
say that meaning like, holy cow, that's amazing. Again, I love when you talked about that, um, decipher or decode some of Dan. I find that a lot with when I was coaching, when I would listen and learn from Dan. I knew he was saying super smart stuff, but I wasn't smart enough to be able to understand it. And that's what I always kind of gave a lot of credit towards Boo. And this isn't a Boo versus Dan thing. I mean, Dan is Boo's mentor, for crying out loud. Is that Boo? I couldn't. I have no interest in coaching the pole vault. I loved watching it, but just once they left the ground, it was mysticism to me. I remember doing level 2 with Boo, and he was doing his amazing stick figures, and he's doing pole vault. And I honestly, for just a brief second, felt like, I think I can coach this event. Like, that's how good of a teacher he was. Now, for
Oh,
the
without a doubt, right?
luck and
Without a doubt.
yeah, for the luck and lives of a lot of kids, I did not go coach the pole vault, so they were lucky I didn't do that. Okay, so Dan, and now Mari. I mean, this is again, this is amazing. This early, I can't even say this early in your career, Andreas, because you're not you're not. I still don't hear you saying, okay, now I'm going to be a track coach, and I'm still not hearing that yet.
Well, we're getting to the inflection point.
Okay, all right,
We're
keep us
getting
going.
closer to the inflection point.
Because
So
you're only on here because you are a track coach. So eventually, you got to become a track coach in this story, right?
it's going to happen.
Okay,
It
okay.
will eventually happen. But like I said, there were a lot of steps along the way that really helped,
Love it.
shape the background and the context around
Love
the
it.
track
Love it.
coaching part. So as part of my graduate school, to finish grad school, I could either choose to write a thesis or I could do an internship. Um, Thesis was more towards the people who wanted to go on and do PhDs.
Hmm.
Internship was obviously a lot more practically oriented. So, with no interest in pursuing a PhD at that point, or actually now either,
I was wondering. I was like, "Are you
feel like
Doctor
I'm
Behm?"
Stuart McMillan jokingly calls me doctor, but that's more because
Mhm.
of Dr. Dre, I think,
Nice.
than any PhD that I have acquired. Maybe, but I do feel like I did acquire a practical PhD, which we will also get to in a little bit here. So, long story short, I kind of decided that I definitely wanted to try to pursue coaching at the end of my second year in grad school.
Okay.
And so, with the help of a couple of different people, I managed to land a graduate internship with Athletes Performance, which is
Okay.
now used to be called Athletes Performance, which is now Exos out in Phoenix, Arizona. So
Yeah.
basically, a sports performance and combine training hub. So I spent, was it this was 2004. So the timelines are a little blurry, but I think it
Sure.
was about 4 months, 4 months out at Exos. Um, and yeah, got to learn about, different training different types of athletes, continuing to learn about what I saw from Dan, namely the integration of multiple aspects within training, which was at that time not necessarily a given. So, namely the integration of nutrition, recovery, and
Mm.
restoration, as well as the training, and as well as building out systems to kind of replicate and scale these activities for different athlete populations. And so, a lot of the mentors I had there went on to become, NFL or NBA, head strength coaches, which was really cool to kind of see their development. So shout out to, Mark Verstegen, the founder and owner of Exos, and Luke Richardson, and Daryl Eto, and Ken Kroner, and all kinds of other folks. And I certainly left out a couple track coach mentors from my Tennessee days. So, just shout out to those guys. I'm probably not going to be able to name everyone that helped and impacted me along the way, but just know that you're not forgotten and you are appreciated. But yeah, so I spent four months out at Exos, and then that kind of helped me decide that I wanted to coach. And
Well, on the
go ahead.
Exos side, was that's more, you said combine type stuff. So that was
Mhm.
more football, maybe basketball, baseball, like a very little actual track people.
Correct. It was no track people. It was all yeah, NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, kind of formative, like a couple MMA guys
Hmm.
were also there while I was there. So
What
yeah, so very, very different sports.
what brought you back to track? And the reason I asked that is like there's more money in football, basketball, heck, MMA today. You kind of started having an in that way. Did you consider going to other sport, or when and how did track pull you back in?
Well, I did, but I felt like I needed, in order to be an effective sports performance coach, I needed more hands-on coaching experience. I'd had a lot of coach observation
Right.
and understanding from a, theoretical standpoint, but I didn't really have much practical coaching experience.
Fair.
So, and I felt like, I'd spent time around with the Lady Vols, where really primarily I helped out one gentleman, Scott Bennett, who was also who was mainly the field events coach. So I had a lot of field events kind of experience, but I really wanted to coach speed because I felt like, again, that was the common denominator between a lot of sports. And so, yeah, after my graduate internship, went back to Europe for a little bit, and then, as you would have it, Texas A&M assembled a brand new staff, and that staff included none other than Vince Anderson. And Vince and I had loosely stayed in touch throughout the years, and at one point, I was kind of thinking of w becoming or learning more from a pure sprint coach, or in a sprint program in college. And so I talked to a couple people, and Vince was one of the options. And then through Dan and a couple other people, they put me in touch with Amy Deem and Gary Winkler.
Mm.
And after talking to all of them, in essence, all of them said they would be interested in having me. And then one of the worst decisions of my life was I had to tell two of them no. Amy was decently easy, simply because Miami kind of disqualified itself for the cost of living.
Mm.
It's too expensive.
Yeah.
As much as much as I would have loved to be out there balling in Miami,
Yeah.
as I knew it would be a volunteer assistantship, that was
Hmm.
just too expensive. And Vince really, so two things sold me, well, three things sold me on A&M. Number one, I knew Vince. So if I went to A&M, I would finally go to a place where I knew somebody.
Right.
I wouldn't just be starting from scratch,
Right.
you know? So, and so number two, once Vince knew I was interested, he basically treated me like a recruit. Like he was recruiting me to come to A&M hard. He would write long emails, and sometimes I'd send him an email when I had questions about, like College Station in the area. And I was like, I got the email. I'm like, he must have spent like hours writing this. It was, so long and detailed. And number three, uh, when I talked to Vince and Coach Henry, obviously the A&M head coach, they both said, look, A&M's not really good right now, but we think we're a sleeping giant, and you could be part and observe the building of a program from pretty much scratch. Where Gary, again, very gracious and very well intended, basically said, "Hey, look, we're Big Ten champs. You come in here. We just want to keep this thing rolling and continue on the path that we're on." And really, what appealed to me was the building. I wanted to see what it was like to kind of build a
Mm.
program. So I thought that would be more interesting and beneficial. So yeah, those things kind of swayed me towards going to Texas A&M.
What, looking back, hindsight's 2020. It's striking that you put it. I like your words there. Like, they're recruiting you. Vince is recruiting you. Pat's giving you the real deal. He's not sugarcoating anything. He's also putting time and attention into you. And I'm not saying that you said, oh, Pat's calling me daily. I'm not saying that at all. But Pat had especially at this time, Pat had a lot of things to do. He was building a program
Absolutely
from
he did.
zero, and yet
Absolutely he did.
he found it important enough to at least speak into you of like, hey, this kid, you're still a kid at this point,
Sure.
could be a part of the puzzle as well. And I'm sure a lot of that had to deal with the Vince's recommendation as well, right? Because Vince's
Right,
word
of course.
rightfully means a lot. What do you think? I mean, because you're not to your point, you're not a seasoned coach, you're not a coach really at this point. You've got a lot of education, there's a lot of potential, but track coaches are famous for saying, what potential is. It just means you haven't done it yet. At that point, it's just striking that there's a lot of desire for you at this stage, at this stage of your career. I'm not trying to be offensive, Andreas. Today you tell me that Pat and Amy and everybody's calling you, like, well, of course, man, we know what we got here. This is great coach here. Back then it was you're still an unknown. I guess is probably the best way of saying it at that point. Why why did they recruit you? What do you think? Again, hindsight 2020.
Honestly, I think it probably is maybe an instance where, I was fortunate enough to have people see more in me than I could see in myself.
Mm,
Like they kind of knew the background, they knew the history, and maybe it was also because it was slightly unconventional. It wasn't just the
yeah,
same old, no offense to anyone. But again, different international background,
yeah,
different,
yeah.
um, yeah, I don't know. You'd really need to ask Coach Henry at that point.
Well,
I don't have an exact answer for you.
that makes sense, though, what you said there. I believe the superpower, one of the many superpowers of a track coach is they see something in someone else before they can see it in themselves. I think maybe that's a big part of the equation. You nailed it, where they were like, oh yeah, this kid's not a great track coach today, but you know what? He's going to be. And you think about again all the background and things that you mentioned there. Maybe that's it. That makes sense to me because I tend to think of that. They see something in someone else before they can see themselves. Is the coach to the athlete? Like, hey, I know you don't see yourself as a great decathlete yet. Just stay with me. You're going to be awesome. And they score 8,000. It also happens coach to coach where it's like, hey, this I know this kid's a grad assistant kid. You know what? They're going to be at the top of the mountain one day, or they're going to be coming towards that mountain. Us get this guy on our staff. That makes sense to me. That makes a lot of
Yeah,
sense.
between Vince and then I'm sure, Coach Henry called Dan because
Mm,
obviously they worked together
sure.
at LSU, and I'm sure, Dan gave the thumbs up. So maybe between all those things, it just kind of
Right.
worked itself out.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I want to be careful here. at this point of your story, it could be easily construed of like, oh, well, yeah, look who was his reference list, Vince and Dan and Mario and blah, blah. But go back, make sure you listen to his story. He didn't have that connection, that reference list at Tennessee. He put himself out there and said, I'll do whatever you want me to do. He didn't know anybody at Texas. It's not like he called Vince and said, hey, can you give me a good word in at Texas when I go? He put himself out there and said, hey, well, I'll do whatever you need or want. I just want to be able to help and learn and things like that. So you're building these connections, because a lot of times we think in track and field, if you don't know someone, you're not going to get the job. And certainly there are cases on both. And I think we like to publicize the ones where it's like, oh, it's his former athlete, or, those kind of things. But there's certainly, like, you build the resume yourself, you'll get the job. So I just want to be careful that it's not, I don't want it to be seen at this point. It's like, oh, well, you lucked into the greatest references in the world. Well, you didn't luck into it. You put yourself out there, easily for rejection, by the way. If your story was like, I called the Vols coach and they said no, so I went to Texas, I'd be like, oh, that makes sense. They didn't know who you were. So you built by working, by sacrificing, by putting yourself out there. So I love this building up of your reference list, if you will. So that's really good. All right, so you're in I almost said Corpus Christi. You're in College Station, Texas A&M. That's a whole different world too, man. I love this uniqueness of Knoxville, Austin, and College Station coming all the way back from home overseas. I think a lot of people forget, because we have recency bias. A&M was not very good, like not very good at all, in retrospect to their conference and stuff. How was that experience? I'm sorry. Let me ask it a different way. Are you now a track coach? Is this now the path, or is there still openness as you start this A&M journey?
I'm definitely trending towards track coach, but my goal is to be able to coach speed and sprints, right? So
I love that you're trending
with
towards
the
it.
with the with the potential to, like, I think the idea at that point was to be a track coach, but also to have the skill set to be more than a track coach,
Ooh,
meaning
okay.
that I could also coach other other sports, at
Yeah.
least in the speed development realm. So
All
I
right.
think that's probably the correct way to phrase it.
Got it. Love it. Okay. Interestingly enough, when you go to A&M, I think this is roughly when you and we don't really meet each other. We just see each other at track meets a lot. I think, if I remember this time frame right, because I knew of you, but I just didn't know who you were. I just didn't know, and I wasn't smart enough to meet other people at that point. So, all right. So A&M, are you on staff? Are you volunteer? What's your official role?
So no, I am a volunteer assistant,
Okay.
and I this is where I say I get my track PA or my PH, my
Yeah. Yeah.
unofficial PhD.
Love it.
Um, I spent 8 years at A&M as a volunteer assistant. So basically an 8 year long apprenticeship.
Wow.
I'll tell you this, I worked in the mornings. I did personal training in the morning. I had no car, so I would bike everywhere. I didn't have my first car till I was 31. Um, and once we got good enough at A&M, then I basically worked in the morning. I coached a professional group on the track and in the weight room. And then I coached helped coach the university groups, track and weight room. So I was just stacking training sessions like for years, right? So this is really a hands-on, full immersive apprenticeship. I also was in charge of the video review. So I would compile all the meet and practice footage on Dartfish, and I would spend hours watching video and analyzing in order to be able to, disseminate information, or just at least pull up a video so a coach, one of the coaches, can show an athlete and talk to them about it. I was also kind of the unofficial liaison to the training room and weight room. So also had a lot of interface, again, kind of integrating these different areas, like I learned
Mm.
from Dan and Exos. Yeah, and on my spare time, I pretty much read any sports science text or research paper that I could get my hands on. So again, the education at that point was, ongoing and nonstop.
Now, I like and dislike a lot of what you just said there in regards to 8 years of doing this, right? So I like self-sacrifice. I love, uh, quote unquote, putting in the work today, getting the payment tomorrow. There's patience involved there. What I dislike about this, Andreas, I don't like volunteer coaches. Meaning, I think you should all be paid, and I think the coaches who are getting paid should get paid more. That's where I really come from with that. It's like, bro, you were doing a lot of work. You should have been getting paid, and that's not a slight at A&M. We had our own. I say we. They had their own staffing and things. So that's not a slight on them. It's my own personal. Like, man, I really wish you'd have been getting paid for all that work. Did you during that 8 years? That's a long time, and you certainly build up your cachet of who you are and what you know and how you do things. You certainly start to become, air quotes here, known. Like, oh, that's Coach Behm. Like it starts becoming part of your identity, if you will, that your outside people and around the coaching world. Did you ever, year 2, year 4, year 6, there had to be a lot of coaching jobs where it'd be like, all right, man, why don't I go work for so and so? I can get paid. It's over and so. But you stayed at A&M. Why? Did you ever have that consideration? I have to assume you did. And why did you stay?
Well, I think there are a couple considerations there, and that you know, College Station was very affordable to live in at the time.
Sure.
Like I was basically splitting an apartment. I was paying $250 in rent a month.
Oh, dude.
Yeah, I know, unheard of, right? That's
Yeah.
like virtually. So, but I will say that I was fortunate enough that at some point throughout my tenure, there were opportunities where, head coaches would come up to me and be like, "Hey, if you're interested in this job on our staff, you don't even have to interview.
It's
You can
yours.
have it's yours if you want
Mm-hmm.
it."
Mm-hmm.
Right? So eternally grateful for those opportunities, but I really felt like I hadn't exhausted my learning at that point because every year I felt like I learned more and more and more throughout my time there. And the only reason I really left at that point after 8 years was I felt like there was nothing left to learn. I felt, I don't know if bored is the right way, but I felt like it was time, but it was from a learning standpoint. And
Mm-hmm.
obviously the way I was getting paid for quite a few years was simply I was able to run my own professional training group there,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I had access to the facilities, to the weight room, to other resources that otherwise wouldn't be available to an outsider, right? So that's kind of how between personal training and running a professional training group, that's kind of how I made money after I want to say the first 2 to 3 years, which were more, just pure volunteer assisting, right? So, and then lastly, as Coach Henry said, A&M was a sleeping giant. It just kept getting better and better and better. And I was like, man, I can't hop off the train now. We're like this close to,
Yeah.
actually
Yeah.
having a breakthrough and doing some amazing things, right?
That's a good point.
And obviously, I was fortunate enough to witness the building of a program and multiple national titles, which, I'm proud to say I like to think I had a small part in as well, um, with my presence. And, yeah, so I think all of that kind of together made the 8 years go by really, really fast without
Hmm.
even, it wasn't like I was sitting there like, oh my God, I hate this. I can't wait till I get an opportunity to, dip out. It was actually a really hard decision for me to leave, even though I knew it was, professionally, it was time at that point.
Let's double click into that because again, I keep seeing this word patience with you, Andres. It's kind of a misnomer, but it's kind of true. I don't know what that actually means, or how I just said that. But we talk a lot about coaches and how they move from institution to institution to institution. We certainly are searching for something. Uh, by the way, I point nothing, no fingers at all thumbs. I coached for 10 years and was at 5 different institutions. My whole goal was to get to the SEC. So every step that I thought that would put me farther down the line, that's what I did. And I always wonder, and because I know for me, I knew I was searching for something. I thought I saw something in the SEC. When I got there, it was not there. Uh, but I was searching for something. So when I see coaches that move to a lot of different places, I'm like, oh, you're searching for something. It may not be career wise, it may be personal wise, etc. You seem to be on that other side of that where you're like, patience, patience. I have more to learn. I have more to learn. Like it seems like a like the track version of some kind of Karate Kid movie, man. Like it's like, no, I got to stay here. I got to keep learning. I need a seventh year with Mr. Miyagi. I need an eighth year with Mr. Miyagi. And then you get to a point where it's like, okay, little birdie's got to be kicked out of the nest and go fly their own wings here. Where does that patience come from? That I don't know that that's an innate trait. It could be partly innate, but I typically think of these kind of things as they're learned. Like you saw it in somebody else, where there was a family member, a teacher, a clergy. It could be a million things. Where does that? I mean, immense amount of patience. I don't know that I've heard this amount of patience in anybody else's journey up to this point. Where does that patience come from for you?
Yeah, I'm really not sure. I think kind of hard to say. I'm a pretty relaxed and chill person. So, but I think what certainly helped the patients was they also felt very well taken care of at A&M. Like
Mm-hmm.
I sincerely enjoyed my time there. The staff took amazing care of me. I learned from all the staff members at A&M, right? From Coach
Mm-hmm.
Henry to Coach Van Adigan to obviously Vince,
Mm-hmm.
who was my primary mentor, to Coach Waters, to Coach De La Garza, to, Francique, who was there. Um, I generally felt like I was part of something, and I was part of something that was bigger than myself and
Mm-hmm.
able to contribute to something, right? So I think from that standpoint, and most of the athletes, they were awesome. You know, it, from a talent standpoint, from personality standpoint. So I really feel like from being taken care of in terms of, having a role. Um, we got into the later years and we'd be in staff meetings sometimes, and Coach Henry would be like, "All right, Andreas, I want you to go out and recruit this person." And I'd be like, "Coach, like remember, I'm a volunteer assistant. I can't go out and recruit." And he's like, "Oh yeah, that's right." Like you almost forget that I was a volunteer assistant at that point, right? So but yeah, I felt really well integrated and taken care of from the staff. Like when I got there, Coach Henry initially said, "Well, I can't make any promises on traveling you as a volunteer to any meets, right?" Um, and then, after a couple months, like just after fall training, there was no question. He took me to every single track meet I ever could have at A&M. So, traveled me around the country. I got to see places I never would have seen otherwise. So again, I think a lot of growth and maturation happened, not just as a coach, but as a person as well. But yeah, I think a lot of that had to do with, the staff, the continued growth of the program, the professional athletes that we were fortunate enough to have be able to attract to A&M due to our success on the collegiate side. And yeah, I think all that kind of culminated in, you know, allowing me to be patient. I think the continued, support of my parents, who were, very understanding of what I was trying to do, and their encouragement was a big part of it as well. And again, financially, it was doable in College Station. It wasn't like I was living, a high rolling lifestyle,
Mm-hmm.
but it was very manageable.
Patience allows us to grow, to build that oak tree. It takes years for that acorn to grow, right? Can you tell us through that 8 years, because it is pretty interesting. You didn't go through 8 years of where they were good the whole time, nor were they bad the whole time. You literally went from, I don't want to overstate it and say that, rubble, but again, A&M was not very good back then, up to, 8 years later. And I think you were there during the time where, didn't A&M win both men and women's indoor and outdoor, or maybe it was the outdoor men and women's for 2 or 3 years in a row or something, like some really just
Yeah,
like,
three years in a row. Yeah, I was
yeah,
there
just
for I was there for all that.
great. I mean, that's just ridiculous.
Yeah,
Uh,
well, that's another reason I couldn't leave, right? We won one. I was like, okay, well, see if we can do it again. Then second time, I was like, well, oh shoot, we could go for something historic in a three-peat. I
right,
can't leave
right.
now.
That's a good
So,
point. That's a
like
good
again,
point.
it was just a natural progression and an evolution of the program and the situation around me that allowed me to be, patient, to reconnect it to your original question.
So what was that like going from, I won't call it zero because it was A&M. I'm gonna call it one. Going from 1 to 10, you got to observe. You're an observer, I think. So you got to observe as well as be an active part of this. What what was the difference? And it could usually one thing is not the one thing, so there may be a couple things. Why was A&M a sleeping giant? Was it the coaches? Was that what they were missing the whole time? Did A&M decide to pour in millions of dollars into the track program? Was that the defining moment? Was it I don't know, the Jamaican national coach moved to College Station, and so all the Jamaicans went there? I know that's not it. But how did they go? How did y'all go from 1 to 10 on a 0 to 10 scale? How did that happen over that 8 years? What were some of the key parts that maybe other coaches can learn from and try to inject into their programs today?
Yeah, so I think for sure, looking back on it, a combination of factors. Coach Henry, I think when he took the job, had a commitment of certain resources that would
Mm-hmm.
be put into the program from a, recruiting budget standpoint to a facilities standpoint, which I think had pretty much been neglected before then, although I'm not certain, I can't speak for the previous, previous staff. Then secondly, for sure, the coaches that,
Mm-hmm.
were assembled there. And what I really want to emphasize was it wasn't just the individual skill set of each coach. I want to highlight really that the interaction between coaches and the way the staff operated as a unit was
Mm-hmm.
really astounding. And I've never seen that anywhere else quite to that extent.
Yeah, we don't talk about that a lot. We talk about the
Yes.
individual coaches in their event groups. We don't talk about what's
Yeah,
that cohesion look like.
yeah. They were
Interesting.
all high powered, but there was a lot of cohesion amongst the coaches. And you could just see that they generally enjoyed working with each other. And you could see that in the banter and the track staff. And,
Hmm.
they were all high powered in their own right. But it wasn't like an individually high powered
Hmm.
setup. There was a lot of cohesion that I think went into, kind of turning that program around. And
Hmm.
one quick side note, just for anyone listening, I wasn't there the original year that staff formed. I got there year two. So I missed year one and was then year two going forward, just
Hmm.
for context
Yeah,
sake.
yeah, yeah. Appreciate that. Yeah, it could have been a year ahead if you would have just gotten there in year one.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay, so that's amazing. And I love that. That's an interesting topic about the cohesion of the coaching staff because I started thinking about some of the important parts of it beyond you hit the nail on the head, right? Support from your administration, not only support financially, obviously, with your budgets and things like that, but also like just support of like we want you to be good. Like I hate to say putting that pressure on you, but actually holding you accountable to being good. Of course, facilities. They're always going to be important, but that importance of that staff cohesion, we don't we touched on it a little bit when we talk to head coaches and we talk about hiring and firing staff. That's part of the job that we don't get trained on, by the way. You kind of just, here you are, the head coach now, go figure it out, of putting your staff together, what direction your program is going to go into, and then the type of people that you put in those positions. And recruiting is an important aspect. I could only see positives to that, right? Like if the distance coach understands and supports the throws coach when that throws recruit is on campus. Well, the distance coach is talking up that throws recruit because they know that's important. Like we need this kid. So, oh yeah, your coach, yeah, we whatever, blah blah blah. Instead of just being like, yeah, yeah, I'm sure you guys, yes, our throws are great. I'm over here on the cross country course. There's that
Right.
cohesion. That's really
Yep.
that's an
And
interesting topic.
yeah, a lot of the coaches were interested and understood other event groups outside their own, so they're able to
Mm,
recruit other areas.
interesting.
Particularly I'd say, particularly Coach Dan Waters, like he understood all events in
Hmm.
track and field,
Hmm.
right? So he could go out and recruit anybody on the road. And he
Great
also
point.
had an interest in other event groups doing well because he saw all the coaches did, but I think it's particularly unique for a distance coach because sometimes the distance coach is separate from all the speed power events,
Hmm.
but he was really invested and integrated into everything that all the other event groups were doing, and again could recruit and
Yeah,
talk to any event group um, that we had. But yeah, I think that
that's a great
cohesion
point.
and obviously for sure the systematic uh, upgrade of talent that happened over the first couple of years was instrumental in turning that program around.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's something new that we haven't
Yeah.
talked about. I love
So
that.
I'll tell you a crazy story,
Mhm.
which I'd never heard, which I've never seen before,
Okay.
about kind of how track was valued and how Coach Henry was valued at A&M.
Okay.
So midway through, so when we got there, A&M was a Nike school. And midway through my time there, at some point, I can't remember the year, A&M switched to being an Adidas school.
Right.
And Coach Henry's like, nope, we're not switching. We're staying Nike. And we're all like, what? Excuse you? Like, no one's going to let the track program stay Nike.
No,
Like,
wait a minute.
that's just
Yeah.
not how this works, right? This is not happening. And he's like, okay. So he went to the administration, and like a couple weeks later, he's like, yeah, we're staying Nike. And so somehow he worked out that the track program was the only track program in the only athletic
Team.
team
Yeah.
in the entire university that was going to remain Nike sponsored, and everyone else was Adidas.
I
Like
mean,
how he
does,
got Nike and Adidas to agree to this,
yeah,
I have
yeah.
no idea.
Yeah, great
But
point.
that's like the craziest power play ever, right? So
I can't think of another example like that. Like that
I
is,
can't either.
that's a great point about Nike and Adidas had to agree to that because I would have never gotten past the administration. It's like, oh, administration is not going to allow this to happen. Full stop right there. But yeah, you had to have two large entities also agree to. Holy cow!
Correct.
Wow, old Pat, he's got a few tricks up his sleeve. That's amazing. But I think to your point, that shows the respect administration had towards a Pat Henry as well, and should be for a lot of our track coaches.
Correct.
All right.
And A&M was starved for winner, right? They hadn't won anything in like
Mm-hmm.
forever. I think track is the first sport that, really actually brought a national championship to campus and made entire Aggie Nation believe that they could be winners. Because
Wow.
usually they were treated as like, Texas's stepchild, right?
Right, right,
So,
right. Wow. All right, you spent 8 years there.
mhm.
You have just had a phenomenal, we talk about like a base, right? When you talk about training, you talk about having to have this big base, like for our distance runners and stuff. You've got such an amazing base for coaching. Where do you go next? I mean, I feel like you could have any job in the country, whatever university you wanted to go to.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously what helped me beyond A&M was, the professional group that I coached there. I had
Hmm.
several successful professional athletes, Boone, Aries Merritt to name
Hmm.
a couple, obviously culminating in an Olympic title and world record
But both have
along the way.
become coaches, by the way, and I
Yes,
I think
uh,
that's a feather in the coach's cap, by the way. I
man,
love that. That's very cool.
Mike, I'm old enough now to have a coaching tree. It's
Yeah,
actually
right.
kind of scary. Like as someone who's maybe chronologically 45 but emotionally 12, that's kind of a scary thought. I definitely have a coaching tree, which
That's so
extends to
cool.
quite a few athletes at this point, actually.
Yeah. Is that
So
right? Oh, I
yeah, it
didn't
is
know.
kind of cool.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I love that. Yeah, I saw Muna,
for sure.
she's been coaching for a while, but now coaches with my buddy Kurt over at
Yeah,
UAB. And I
exactly.
was like,
UAB.
man, that's so cool. It's cool, for the outsider, seeing these great athletes that go on, any athlete, but obviously, the caliber of Aries and Muna speaks for itself. But it's like, wow, it's like they love this. It's one thing to love the sport so much, you give your life to it as an athlete, and there's accolades and monetary rewards for that. But then to say, you know what, I want to give back more. I want to keep doing this, so I'm now going to coach. Like that, just that's cool. It's just really really cool, man. I love that. I really
Yeah, no,
do.
it's great to see. You just hope no athlete does it because they don't know what else to do with themselves. I always
Yeah.
tell them like that you should explore other avenues outside of track. Just be sure this is what you want to do because it definitely is a grind. It's not,
Yeah.
you'll be up at night caring and worrying about other people more than you want to. So you just make sure you're in it not just because you don't know what else to do with yourself.
That's a really good point, Andreas. That's really good. Okay, so keep going. Where do we go next then?
Well, I am at A&M, and after Aries has a phenomenal year in 2012, we're at A&M for one more year, and John Godina calls me up. He's starting a professional training center in Phoenix, Arizona. At that point, called World Athletic Center. In hindsight, probably not the best nickname, namely nicknamed Whack.
Whack.
Yeah, well. But yeah, so he's recruiting me to come out and be one of the founding coaches of this new venture. And he basically just recruits me for like an entire year,
Hmm.
wanting me to, kind of go out there. And I really kind of like that idea. It was kind of, I liked the NCAA setting, but I felt like I wanted to operate independent of the NCAA setting. There are a lot of restrictions, particularly like training restrictions. I mean, 8 hours in the fall is pretty ridiculous, to be honest.
Mhm.
So, it's just one example. But yeah, I was ready to, and again, I saw that as an avenue to potentially um, branch out into other sports other than simply track and field.
Mm.
So, obviously, I already knew Phoenix. I'd been out there for my graduate internship.
Right.
We were actually going to use Exos as our home base,
Mhm.
so it was kind of a bit of a homecoming. So again, I would know people, which was great. And yeah,
Did you
Aries
did
Aries
you
decided to come with, and so we decided to hit the road and move out to Arizona.
did you know John?
We had met before. I didn't know John super well,
Okay.
right? But we talked a lot
Right.
because it wasn't so much that I was skeptical, I was very interested.
Yeah.
But I told him if I come out there, I want to finish out. It was midway through the track season. I said I want to finish out the season at A&M. I don't want to just leave middle of the year.
Right.
Like I want to finish out this season with them, right? And so I knew
Yeah.
Aries he was eager to move. They were both probably ready at that point, maybe also just to be in a bigger city
Yeah.
in College Station. And so, yeah, so we moved to Arizona to be part of the World Athletic Center, now Altis since rebranding in 2015.
So two things. One, John Godina also has his own episode, so if you're listening, you might go check out him. Two, John and I have become very good friends through the World Throw Center, World Athletic Center, all this. And I can still remember. Like I said, we became good friends, so we're having conversations that are between him and I at these points. And I remember him saying, "Hey, Mike." So it's not official yet. I think he probably said he has to get through the track season. He goes, but do you know Aries Merritt's coach? And one of the things that I still to this day don't like about our sport is we hardly know who coaches the pros. Like the college, it's easy, right? I can go Google, LSU's coaching staff, so I know who's coaching all those kids that are there. But once they go pro, we never hardly ever know. That's what I kind of love about this Sprint series on Netflix. Like they're showing Dennis Mitchell and Lance Brahman, and it's like, oh, like see, there's an actual coach. We know who coaches the Patriots every year. We know who's the Miami Dolphins coach every year, but we never know the pros. So he's like, hey, do you know Aries Merritt's coach? And I was like, no, man, no one knows who the pros coaches are. And he's like, yeah, this guy's name is Andreas Behm. And I was like, oh wait, yeah, I do know him. I was like, I didn't know he coached. I was like, he's coaching A&M. He's like, yeah, he's going to be our first, big time coach. Reese is moving out, blah, blah, blah. And, what struck me, what I like seeing this side of it. So if you want to know John's side of it, you can go listen to John and his side. He did a great job of explaining, his role and everything. For you, I was with John throughout these steps that he took. And it's just, I sit on the sideline and just like awe because of how risky it is. Like, I mean, what he was trying to put together, and it continues today, doesn't exist. It just doesn't, and you guys were on the ground floor. Why take such a big risk for you? And what I mean by that is you could have had any job you wanted out there. I believe so. I just believe that from your now your resume is really full. Like we know who Coach Behm is now at this point after 8 years of A&M and all the other things you've done and the people that you've networked with. This seems really risky. That whole thing could have folded at any day. I know the background of everything. It could have folded any day, and yet you went there, and then I know you're going to bring in other characters into the story here. You guys, I mean, just busted your tails and made it work and have made it successful. And now it has such a huge impact in our sport, not just coaching, but the coaching education. So, I mean, I'm gonna have you tell that whole story. But why so risky? Why take such a risk at this point in your career?
Well, first off, I mean, all credit to John for being the visionary of, even attempting, what you said is kind of the unthinkable, right? So he had the vision and the drive and the stones
Yep.
to even attempt this and put this thing together. So forever and always be grateful to John for his vision in this endeavor, right?
Yep.
but I really feel like, again, there were a couple things that steered me in that direction. Number one, I knew that other coaches were coming on board, and I
Mhm,
knew it was going to be Dan Pfaff,
mhm,
and I knew it was also going to be Stuart McMillan.
mhm.
And I also was fully aware that this could crumble within like 2 years of
Easily.
its existence, right?
Mhm,
But I felt like if we pulled it off, it could be something amazing and unique.
mm,
And I knew that even if it crumbled after 2 years, if I spent time around Dan and Stu, that I would be a much better coach for that and it would be worth the risk. And B, our whole goal was to try to build something that was in our vision, not
mm.
controlled by anybody else, that we could build something for track and field, for athletes, and for coaches that was kind of its own independent acting entity
Mm.
and that we enjoyed working within, right? It wasn't controlled by USATF. It wasn't controlled by World Athletics. It wasn't controlled by the NCAA. It was kind of its independent own thing that we really could put forth the vision and the guidelines and how we wanted to operate it. So I
Mm.
think that was very appealing to me in terms of just, following an already kind of established entity that had, certainly benefits to it, but also potential restrictions.
So give us your side of Altus because you were there on the I'll say the first floor, ground floor. John did a couple of years, like I said, it was World Throws Center at first and things like that. But certainly when you and Stu and Dan came along, that was like the World Throw Center with John was kind of, and these are my words, and I don't think John would get mad at me for saying it this way. That was like the prequel, like that was the before, and then it really started because now you started doing other events. He was very focused, for obvious reasons, on throws. Now you started bringing in the sprints and things like that, and pole vault became a big deal, stuff like that. So kind of give us like the history of you started at World Throws. Give us your history. So you started at the World Athletic Center and you're responsible for X, Y, and Z, and then kind of take us through the line. And what I really want to focus on where it gets to that point is the coaching education side, the fireside chats, the things like that have really, it wasn't too long ago that I'd ask someone, what do you do for coaching education? Do you do USATF? Well, first of all, not too long ago, it was like that was it. That was your only real choice, USATF. And then USTF CCA came in with a great coaching education academy. And now, when I ask people, so what coaching education do you do? Do you do USATF, USTFCA, Alta? Like it's just a natural, like there's a great coaching education program. Do you do anything through them? So give us kind of your from your eyes that history of how it's now become today what it is today with Altus.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think, with the names that you named, obviously Kevin Tyler came in a couple years later and has
Yes.
also been, formative in, molding and shaping, what Altus is today. But we always knew and wanted Altus to have a dual role. It was always meant as a center for track and field. And
Mm-hmm.
that means should be a center for athletes as well as a center for coaches. Coaches often are so undervalued or not really acknowledged,
Amen.
especially, particularly, as you already mentioned, especially in this sport. So we really wanted to make sure that we had this dual function as a home and resource for athletes and coaches. And we also viewed it as kind of our mission and duty to continue to educate the next generation of coaches because that's how we all learned. We learned because other coaches were willing to share with us and put out resources that allowed us to grow and continue to perfect our craft. So we viewed that as part of our fundamental mission. So, from that standpoint, even today, we have multiple tiers to help coaches become better at their craft. Yes, we have online courses. Um, we have in-person coaching programs. You mentioned the fireside chat. We call them poolside chats because they started out in Arizona where we would just sit around the pool and talk shop.
That's
So
right.
we have these in-person programs that we host multiple times a year. We have sports performance online courses. We have track and field uh, courses. We even now have gone so far as to offer a full-fledged master's degree program
Yeah.
in strength and conditioning. So that's getting
Jeez.
rolled out this this season for the first time. So that gives practitioners from any sport the opportunity to get a legit master's degree through Altis and partners. So yeah, we offer a lot of free resources as well, and we
Mhm.
offer internships for young and developing coaches who just want to come and, like I did at A&M, be part of get dropped into a training environment and be part of something and kind of absorb knowledge that way. So, it was very important to us to have all these educational branches from a philosophical standpoint to give back to coaches, but
Mhm.
also from a business standpoint, we understood that in order to sustain what we're doing, no independent center without sponsorships is able to sustain themselves solely on athlete fees,
Mhm.
right? So we knew that we needed to have different, revenue streams to be able to operate and stay afloat. And, there have been multiple times where things have gotten really, really tight, particularly during COVID and other times where, we've had to make some hard choices as kind of the founding coaches and part owners. But you hear again and again that 2 to 3 years in, a lot of small or independent businesses never get past that point. And we're here now, over a decade in, with what we think is, fortunate to have a wide-reaching network and wide, recognition throughout the world with what we're doing. And yeah, so we hopefully we can make it another 10 years at least.
I love, on the business side of it, it makes a lot of sense, the courses and again, having a master's, when I saw that, like that's just this is not putting down these other organizations because I value their coaching education, but USATF ain't got a master's, USTFC ain't got and maybe that's not their role to have that. I just thought that was so unique and really an example of the, hey, we are going to be educators of coaches in sport. I just thought that was like, because that can't be easy. It's hard enough to create these courses that you guys create and these guidebooks that you have that a lot of them are for free, which again, I love the mixture that you have on the business side versus the solely philanthropic side of coaching coaches. So I just love that. But then to do a master's, I mean, there just had to be so much behind the scenes work and frustration and hair pulling out to pass the things that you need to have a master's, a master's degree.
Yeah, well, a lot of the resources that we've created are also around things that we wish we had had when we were
Uh,
coming up in this industry, right? Within the coaching profession.
mhm.
So, and also identifying potential gaps and talking to other people like, what does the sports performance, what does the coaching industry lack right now where we can step in and help fill a void
Yeah.
to, upscale everything. And again, we view it as our job to educate coaches because we want to leave the sport in a better place.
Mhm.
And we feel like the best way to do that is to be hands-on and contribute to coaches' education. And now we fully acknowledge there we are not the only resource out there. There are phenomenal other resources for coaches to grow, but like almost any coach, you really should diversify your knowledge portfolio, if you
Yeah.
so will.
Yeah. I like that.
Learn from a variety of sources. And we do
Yeah.
feel like that we are a very reliable source of information, cutting edge knowledge for coaches to upscale themselves.
Yeah, I love that. So tell us about your progression through Altus. Today, last I saw, your title is VP of Performance, which I love. That should be every, like, instead of coach, we should all be VP of Performances. I love, like, when you, like, what does a coach do? Bam, in the corporate world, VP of Performance. I love that title. You didn't start out as the VP of Performance, meaning you came in as a coach. Talk to us of your progression and how you got deeper into the roles there at Altus to culminate today as the VP of Performance.
Yeah, well, like all of my colleagues at Altus, I've worn a lot of different and continue to wear a lot of different hats within the business. So obviously, my passion and the thing that drives everything is still the coaching. I'm still at the core a sprints and hurdles coach and get excited every day to go out to the track and, coach.
That's cool.
But to, work, to make all this work, we've worn a lot of different hats. So I've been, for example, initially I was in charge of, I was the recruiting director.
Hmm.
And I was also the education director, which I still do a lot of to this day. Uh, you know, Helping put on in person programs, namely the ACPs, again, the coaching programs or coaches visit for close to a week to observe and listen to different presentations and hang out with us. Um, as well as coordinating then different online education programs. I've been in charge of helping with the, sports science. I've been in charge of helping with the video. Um, all these different titles kind of culminated because I still wear all these hats. There was no real one title
Mm.
that encompassed it. So kind of VP of performance, though my role is clearly not strictly just in performance, is kind of cool enough and vague enough to
Yeah.
allow me to, jump around into a myriad of different roles, basically where I'm needed most to fill gaps and continue to, be of value to Altus.
I love that. Do you? I'm curious. I'm a huge advocate of coaching education. That's why I really wanted to, dive into the coaching education side of Altus. And again, partly because you also do a lot of unique things with your coaching education. Do you? COVID moved a lot of our programs. So like with USCTF, I grew up in the USCTF era, so level one and multiple level twos. I was already here at Gill when USTF CCCA Academy started, but I certainly would have done all through those things, and those are amazing. I found the most value in like a level two. Certainly the classwork was amazing. Actually learning from Boo and Dennis Shaver was my sprints coach. Gary Winkler was one of my sprint coaches. But there was it's infamous that we would talk about the being in someone's room until 2 or 3 in the morning. Like I have a distinct memory of being in, I don't even know whose room it was, but Kaba Tolbert was in there and Todd Lane and Ron Grigg and JJ Hunter. And we just talked, not just track like as a fan, like, oh, how fast Carl just ran or whatever, yada, yada, but coaching, like, oh, what do you do? How do you do that? Hey, you had that athlete. What were, how did you structure the fall with her and things like that? And that part of it was extremely valuable as well. Through COVID, we moved a lot of our coaching education to online, to Zoom, basically. I know you guys had to pivot to that as well. I'm assuming you guys had to pivot to that.
Yeah, well, we were actually ahead of the curve. We were already on that.
Okay, good, because that's where
And
my
then
question is.
COVID came along and everyone basically caught up to
Caught
us
up,
by necessity. Yeah.
because that's what I'm wondering
Thanks,
is.
COVID.
Yeah, that's right. Our business advantage just went away, a competitive advantage, right? Do you see coaching education going more to one way or the other? Like, should it all go? And things aren't black and white. So I'm asking this in a black and white way, though. Is should coaching education go to more online exclusively because you can reach a wider, like we can coach more coaches that way? Uh, or should it go back to the in person because there are some intangibles of the in person that you cannot recreate on the Zoom?
Well, I think you kind of answered your question. You answered the question yourself. I mean, those are certainly not mutually exclusive.
Mm.
And I think it also depends on where you are individually in your coaching journey as to what may be most applicable
Mm.
to you during a given time, right? I see value in both. I think there is great value in learning online and getting fundamentals and concepts and theoretical knowledge online, and then potentially coming and seeing how that is delivered practically in person and being able to have those informal chats.
Mm.
Again, some of the things that are most impactful that coaches tell us when they come to visit us is, man, just the chat I had with, you know, the coaches at during practice while the athletes were warming up and they were just explaining some concept of what they were seeing. That was the most invaluable part of the experience.
Right.
Or the poolside chats where, again, we sit down and we just talk training, whatever we want to talk about.
Mhm.
I think both the online and in person have great value.
Mhm.
Maybe there's a sequential way to look at it. as part of our master's program, it's a combination of you do the online work, but then you also have like small residencies periodically where you're coming to visit us in person to top up the theoretical knowledge
Mm,
with practical experience and observing other people coach. Like I feel there's so much value in observing people coach.
mhm,
Anytime I go somewhere, I just enjoy watching other coaches coach, not just to see their methods, but to see how they talk to their athletes,
mhm.
how they present themselves at training, how they structure and flow from element into element in the training session. All those things are things you can't, theoretically, you can kind of get an idea about it, but there's no substitute for seeing it in person,
Mhm.
right? So I feel like both of those, elements are important, and maybe it's important to get some baseline theoretical knowledge online to be able to have some meaningful conversations in person once a coach is ready to have an in-person, experience.
We didn't practice this, but you are literally leading to my next question. In football, in basketball, and maybe some other sports, there is this culture of like staffs or individual coaches, like during their off season, will go visit other staffs or other coaches. Maybe when the air raid for American football was becoming bigger and bigger, people would go visit Hal Mummy, kind of, I think he's considered the father of the air raid of the spread offense. And so people would go visit, and Hal probably would have to play against these guys in some form or fashion throughout the next decade, would still sit down and be like, yeah, here's the philosophy of my offense. What would you do in this situation, coach? Yeah, we'd probably line up here, X, Y, and Z. I know it happens in track and field, but it doesn't feel like it's common. It feels like it's still like a rare special thing where a coach will come and visit another coach to do exactly what you're talking about, observing coaching. You kind of already uh, talked about point A, was how important is that? But B, why do you think that's not? You guys are pioneered on the coaching education side. Like I know that's part of the ACP and things like that. That they actually participate and watch and practices. Why isn't that a part of our culture and the track coaching side? We have some of the brightest and most curious people in the world, in my opinion. But that part doesn't seem. Is it the coaches want to keep the knowledge to themselves, which you and I both know is ridiculous, or is it just it's not in our culture to go do that part of coaching education?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I actually kind of perceive that a little differently. Coming from a European perspective,
Mm,
I actually find that the US, in terms of sharing coaching knowledge, is fairly progressive. And
mm,
I actually find that one of the advantages as to why the US is a powerhouse in track and field. Europe is way more secretive than the US.
mm,
Like they are shocked that anyone would talk to another coach. And I've found no matter who it may be here in the States, if I'm curious about something, if I had a question, I could ask Lance Brauman, I could call Boogie
mm,
Johnson,
mm,
and they'd gladly talk to me and share information. It is about you having to reach out, but I've never really had a coach turn me down if I've asked to come visit or, share information. So I actually think the US is fairly progressive.
mm,
That doesn't mean that there couldn't be more of that.
mm,
Obviously one of our underlying tenets here with Altis is that we don't have secrets. We want to share. We also view the sharing as part of kind of auditing ourselves, right? Sometimes
mm.
someone may ask a question that we never thought of or check us on something, and we have to reevaluate whether we're right or wrong about that. Again, that's kind of putting yourself out there, which is sometimes scary to do,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
it also helps evolve you as a coach. So, yeah, I've really never had that problem. Like I'll give an example in 2008 when I went to the Olympics for the first time in Beijing. I went to the Olympic holding camp in Dalian. Brand new. I don't know, I was the youngest coach there by far.
Mm,
I was in my mid 20s there with Muna Lee, and I really didn't know anyone that well. And I could have just gone about my day and everything. And the coaches who really took me under their wing were Brooks Johnson, John
mm.
Smith, Mike Holloway. They helped me out tremendously my
Wow.
first ever holding camp. I'd go into the dining area and I didn't really know anyone. Young Buck, come sit over here with us. So I just hang out with them. They, for some reason took interest in me, and really kind of, shared of themselves freely and showed me the ropes. So, I have, I think like in the US, certainly it could be better. But I feel like compared to a lot of other places, there it's fairly open. But I do agree with your assessment that in other sports, there's a lot more sharing and collaboration that goes on. Yeah, because I've seen, basketball coaches will share different types of concepts. Offensive and defensive coordinators will get together and share, their schemes throughout different times of the year
Right.
with their direct competitors. So, but yeah, like I said, I've rarely had, you know, ever issues. I've never had an issue sharing something with someone else, and rarely have I ever had an issue with me asking a question and someone not being not a fellow coach not wanting to give me an answer.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%, but I don't see it happening enough. Part of, I think we just touched on this a bit in our pre-interview. Part of the reason we started this podcast 5 years ago, by the way, right before COVID even hit, which is still amazing that I didn't have confidence in myself that 5 years from then I would still be doing this, that people would still be wanting to listen to this. But a little bit of a goal we wanted to do was to show that, one, it doesn't matter the insignia on your polo, that doesn't make you a good coach. You being a good coach is what makes you a good coach. So meaning that Mouse doesn't know what he knows because he's at Florida. He knows what he knows because of the work he's put into the craft of coaching. And a coach at Neosho County Community College. I used to coach JUCO in Kansas at Neosho County. That a coach at Neosho, just because they're only at Neosho, doesn't know anything. That's not true. Now, when I was there, that coach didn't know anything because I didn't know anything. But I just don't see it happening a lot. We go to a lot of clinics, right? We go to the USTFCCA convention in December, and someone speaking, people will be in there listening. I see more people thinking they can't approach coaches than the opposite. Like, oh yeah, hey, there's Mouse. I'm gonna go ask him. Hey, what tell me a little bit of how you struggled moving Grant from a 7 to 8 step to 7 step, or whatever coaching. I don't pretend to know coaching anymore. It's been so long, but I just don't see it happening very often. But when it does happen, I agree with you. I rarely hear of a track coach that would turn someone down. I'm still very enamored by Mouse, specifically when I was a know nothing high school coach, my first year coaching, and I saw this guy went from Gainesville High School to University of Florida, and this is back in the old AOL days, and I somehow had his AOL. I don't know how you knew AOL names back then, but I had Mouse's. And so I just messaged him out of the blue. I was in Chicago, he's in Gainesville. I messaged him and was like, hey, I also went to coach college one day. How did you do it? And he talks to me like a normal person. I mean, here's like the University of Florida coach, and he's talking to this guy he doesn't even know who it is in Chicago, like I'm a peer of his, and that really, like, that set an example for me of like, oh, wait a minute, if that guy has time to talk to anybody, well, then who am I to not help? As if someone has a question for me. So I agree with you. I don't see people turning that down. I just don't see what I think is enough people stepping out and asking those coaches out there, having those type of conversations.
Yeah, sure. And it's sometimes it can be intimidating and tricky. It's
Sure.
definitely putting yourself out there a little bit and admitting that maybe you don't know everything or that you need
Yeah,
help with something.
that's a good point.
It's funny to me too, because I'd heard from several people like, oh, over the course of the years, oh, Mouse is kind of to himself and he doesn't really talk that much. And like Mouse has never been anything but great with me. I was like, what are
Agree.
you talking about? Like that's
100%.
not the person that I, even initially got to know probably back in 2008 or even a
Hmm.
little before then. I was like, I I don't know where you get that impression from,
Right.
other than maybe he's initially a little quiet and that's
It's the
why
story we
it's
tell ourselves,
intimidating,
though.
right? Yeah, for
It's
sure.
the
It's
story
a
we tell ourselves.
it's the story you tell yourself. I mean,
Hmm.
the thing I have to work on and check myself is sometimes I think that as a coach, you also shouldn't just learn from older and experienced coaches, but there's some young and super talented and creative
Mm.
coaches out there. You almost
Mm.
got to leave your ego at the door to ask someone who's younger than you to see what's up and ask them for some help and advice, right? But
Yeah.
there's a wealth of creativity, coming up behind us as
Huh.
well that I think could be, that merits acknowledgement and also discussions around what they're doing. So
Yeah.
who knows?
That's a
Wis
really,
wisdom in front of me, or wisdom in one direction for the older coaches, and then, maybe some creativity on the front end and some tech know-how for the new school.
Yeah, I love that. We try to work hard on not just going out and trying to capture, the guys that are at their tail end of their careers. Mouse, I hope you coach for a long time, but you're going to retire
Word.
one day here, Mouse, and you deserve to retire, by the way. But also that first year coach, because again, their experiences are so like for their stories, their journey. It's like, man, I know you've only been coaching for a year, and maybe you think you don't deserve to. I've had this. I'm not saying this egotistically. I've had this spoken to me when I've invited someone on the show before. I haven't done anything to deserve it, Mike. I'm like, you coach track, period. You deserve it right then and there. That's why we started the podcast, for crying out loud. But your experiences as a first year, second year, fifth year coach, there's importance there. There's people that will learn from that. So I think that's a really good point. I've never thought about that of like, asking newer coach, not just the guys long in the tooth of, hey, how are you tackling these things? Because we get in our box. Well, these guys maybe are not in their box as much because they've only been in it for a year or two and come from different and varied backgrounds. Maybe they came from a business background. And so they think about coaching hurdlers just a little different because of whatever, 7 steps, 3 steps, whatever, those kind of things. So
100%. I mean,
that's
yeah,
interesting.
I always believe you can learn from everybody, and everyone has a certain way of doing things, and
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, but you're right. The perspective for new coaches is so different because, as we kind of chronicled, I had mentors and certain ways of learning about doing things, and this is all kind of still the fledgling time of the internet, where now you have
Oh,
so much information, you're flooded with information. So as opposed to having to scour for information, which I kind of had to do, now you have all this at your fingertips, and it's hard to discern what is really useful, valid, and good information versus all the other noise that's out there,
mhm.
right? So I think as coaches, it's also our job to help the younger coaches potentially sift through some of the, almost unlimited access to
Yeah.
information that they have, and point out, good sources.
It's funny when you're saying that because Andreas, you're younger than I am. So when I hear you saying, hey, I didn't have I was at the fledgling of internet. We didn't have it like it is today. I can go on YouTube and find 1,000 different things, just on the 7 or 8 step to the first hurdle, for example. I go find 1,000 videos just on that. It's funny that you say that because I'm like, oh, what are you talking about? I was in the fledgling of the internet. Like you're younger than I am. You had the internet. It's not what it is today, of course, but that just made me think. It's like, today is 2024, and we know what the internet today is. I'll be interested when I'm doing an interview in 2034 and we're like, when I was starting coaching in 2020 and 2024, the internet wasn't like it was today. We didn't have whatever we're going to have in 2034. We don't have VR where I can actually go and be at Mouse's practice. It's just funny how
Yeah,
the
it's like
evolution of it's going to be.
you had to type in your questions in Chat
Yeah.
GTP back in 2024?
Oh, wait a minute. That's cutting edge still right now, 2024. You talking about Chat GPT? I guarantee you 99% of the people listening right now have not played around with GPT, and and I haven't done it on the coaching side, but I've done it in the business side. I can't imagine how faster my coaching progression would have probably happened if I'd have had something like GPT. I mean, it's unbelievable. Are you using it commonly or
Oh
what?
yeah, like
Yeah, yeah,
I definitely use it for different research and
hmm,
projects. And again, it's all with a grain of salt because you kind of
correct.
have to understand where they're getting sources from. But yeah,
Just
I
like just
definitely,
like any Google search, by the way. Just
for
to
sure.
point that out. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
Hmm, I love that.
definitely use that and to kind of condense different thoughts and
Hmm.
other things of that nature. So yeah, it's definitely very interesting and valuable, and
Yeah.
yeah, new frontier, that's for sure.
I'll tell you, it's a spoiler alert. So when you read the show notes for our podcast, that's written by ChatGPT that I create by getting the transcript from YouTube. So we put the video on YouTube. It automatically creates a transcript of this. I paste and copy that in GPT and say, hey, write me a podcast episode description based on this transcript because I'm not a good writer. And you can go back, you could probably go back to our earlier episodes and read the show notes, and you'll probably easily see when did Mike stop writing and when did Chat GPT. It's like, oh yeah, Mike, you had no clue. I was trying to trying to remember our conversation and write show notes. This thing takes the transcript and puts it into a digestible, episode description. There's so many things you can do with GPT. It's what Google was back in the day when it first started, when we still didn't know, well, what do you mean before Google was a verb? Somehow GPT is going to become a verb. Did you GPT it? Like that's what we're going to start saying. It's going to be amazing. One more observation and then a question. Andres, when we're talking about coaching education, I found it and it was valuable for me, and so I recommend it to a lot of other coaches. You can know a lot of things and you can apply a lot of things, knowledge that you've learned, with your athletes and such. I think there is a different level of understanding, or maybe mastery might be the right word, when you teach what you know. I taught level one for 30 different episode classes there, and I've done some clinics and things like that, and I realized I learned it better by, I have to make sure that person understands what I'm saying and that person understands it. Do you find that, like, as you started teaching more, because you got taught a lot, some of it, informal, meaning at practice and things like that, but you've done some formal education with it too, and now you're teaching. Did you find, was there an accelerant for you in the coaching when you started doing more teaching?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, even though I don't know if accelerant is the right word,
Okay.
I think it maybe deepens understanding of
Yeah,
what you already,
yeah,
kind of
depth.
what you already have. It provides layers and
Yeah,
levels
yeah, yeah.
and different ways of explaining the same thing over and over, depending on the person. And it's not just, it's not just solely one direction where I am just explaining. A lot of I think the growth comes from the questions that I get back, because often,
Mm,
participants or coaches will ask questions that maybe I hadn't even considered before, or they're
mhm,
challenging a concept that I then need to go back and reevaluate and dig deeper into for myself for better understanding and then further explanation. So I think those are kind of the benefits of teaching. It's also different explaining it to like one person versus explaining it in a room. So it gives you different skills in terms of presentation style, explaining the same thing.
mhm. Yeah, depth is the right word, not accelerant. Yeah, depth. But that's why I said maybe mastery. So,
Mhm.
so depth of the
Yep, I
subject or
think
the topic.
mastery, yeah, mastery
Yeah,
is probably a better word for that.
yeah, I love that. All right, Andres, let's wrap it up today. Tell us, so what is Andres doing today? What, I mean, you're so here's what's amazing to you. You've had really, I mean, just a storybook experiences. I mean, the way you got into coaching, I mean, that is so unique. I love that. The athletes you've been, blessed to work with, the coaches that have poured into you and that you're now pouring into other coaches. And yet you're so young. And what's so cool about that, if we use a track analogy, if we're kind of think of your career as like a 400-meter dash, it's easy to think sometimes, because we're in the muck of it. Maybe for a guy your age and stage, maybe you would, if I'd say, hey, where do you think you are in your career as a 400 meter? You're like, maybe I'm at the 300-meter mark. The finish line's still a ways away and it's going to be painful to get there. But in reality, Andreas, you might be at the 100-meter mark of the 400. I mean, the amount of years you've coached, you will do that again. Like you will double the amount of years you've coached, but based on your age and based on health and advances that we're doing in medicine and things like that. So you're, like I said, maybe at the 150-meter mark, which is so cool for a guy like me. I get to sit on the sidelines and watch. I get to see another 200, 250 meters, 300 meters of the race that pour out of your career. It's going to be what you're doing today. It's amazing. I'm going to be blown away at what you're doing in 2030 and 2040. It's so cool to be able to see that. So talk to us today. What is call it an average day in your life look like as this, I'm gonna say private coach, meaning outside of collegiate coaching. I think there's a lot of people that have a lot of interest in that. What's an average day for you as we wrap up today?
No, well, I appreciate those words, Mike. Look, man, I'm just, hopefully I make it all the way around the track. If I'm only at the 100, I hopefully I can make it all the way around the oval. So, yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, if you ask right now, like right now, we're in the process of moving. So
Mm,
we're moving from Atlanta, which had been our awesome home for the last 3 years. We're back to Phoenix, Arizona for this upcoming season and beyond. We just think weather-wise, um, location-wise, with the LA 2028 Olympics coming up on the West
mm,
Coast,
right,
I think a strategically good spot to be located. Again, Phoenix is a stone's throw away from LA.
right.
Um, so yeah, we're in the process of kind of relocating and reestablishing ourselves in Phoenix. So, if someone's looking for a training group on the West Coast, be sure to hit us up.
Hmm.
But yeah, I'd say if I gave you a generic day outside of what is happening right now,
Right.
really the morning time is for coaching,
Hmm.
and then afternoons and evenings is for more business operations. So basically things that I'm in charge of. Again, I do a lot of I do a lot of the video intake, video editing, um, some of these sports science stuff, whether it's, like running different equipment. Um, I do intern coordination. So I'm basically in charge of, we have intern coaches. So I'm in charge of coordinating them and also making sure that they are being educated properly and getting good value out of their time spent with us.
Hmm.
I work on producing different educational courses,
Right.
and then I also work on hosting different educational courses and, organizing all of that. So all those organizational things take up part of my day as well. And naturally, also basically writing training programs, reevaluating training footage that we took that day, and making sure that we are ready to go for the next training session the following day. So that could be in a nutshell, kind of a day. Like I said, myself and everyone at Altis, we wear all kinds of different hats. I think that makes us fairly unique and versatile in that regard. I like to think I have acquired and built some skills. Um, I don't want to say beyond coaching, but I think that are maybe different
Hmm.
and maybe complement coaching in slightly different and unique ways. So, yeah, that's it. But we have to work to maintain what we have going on, and part of our work is part of our work allows us then to go coach, which is what we love to do.
Right.
But both those things go hand in hand.
All right. So there's some elite athlete. They're either graduating or they're looking for a coach, or there's coaches who are interested in these poolside chats or this masters. Where does someone go? What's the best route to contact Altus? And who is it? Is it you? Is it Stu? Is it info at
Yeah.
altus.edu? Where does someone go if they want to find out more about Altus and what they can provide for them?
Yeah, really, pretty much any of those. Though I would say, start with our website www.altus.world. Again, a lot of coaching courses there, free resources, um, available on that website, whether that's online stuff, in person. And by the way, we also love having coaches informally visit us. If you're ever in
Mm.
the Phoenix area and just want to drop by for a training session, get a hold of us. We love having visitors. That happens almost weekly,
That's
right? We'll have
cool.
someone stop by from some sport that wants to kind of hang out, or a therapist wants to come and hang out and check out what we've got going on. So please, we love having drop-in visitors. Welcome anytime.
It,
Otherwise, just get a hold of us on social media. We'll always answer. Like I said, we're here to connect and collaborate. We have no secrets. Anyone is invited. So to check out what we have going on. And yeah,
I love, first of all, I love that unofficial tagline. We have no secrets. I mean, that there's like deep meaning. I just kind of like that. Like I said, the unofficial logo there, slogan there. I love that. Two, I started thinking, obviously, our audience is built of track coaches, and my whole my whole life, my passion is for track coaches. But track coaches know other coaches, right? Football, basketball, tennis, golf. Is what you provide, because I think about it on the track coach side. So if you were to ask me, is what Altus provides valuable to track coaches? Easy 100% answer. Check. Yes, absolutely. I know we've seen football and like maybe baseball, and I think basketball. You mentioned MMA. Is there something at Altus educationally wise for all coaches? Like if a track coach is best friends with the tennis coach, would it be appropriate for that track coach to go, hey, to learn more about, some things that might help your tennis players become better athletes and therefore better tennis players, check out altus.world? Or is it more focused towards the football, track, basketball world?
it is really for any coach.
Okay.
We've had, as an example, we've had coaches from pretty much any sport that I can think of visit, including such sports that I'd never heard of before, called like hurling. which is an Irish sport, which has been described to me as a combination of lacrosse and murder. So yeah,
I-
I'll never forget that, right? But like we've had swim coaches, tennis coaches, distance coaches,
okay.
NFL coaches, NBA coaches, uh, therapists, sports psychologists,
Okay.
anyone in the sporting realm has come to visit us.
Hmm.
And we also have, again, offering, valuable information for them um, on our website through different courses and resources, right? We
Okay.
have a Need for Speed course, which is all about speed within team sports and change of direction. We have the Altis Foundation course, which is basically as the name says, an underpinning course for anyone who's interested in anything regards to coaching and sports performance. We have a performance therapy course, which is designed for sports medical practitioners. So again, we operate in this integrated realm where we don't see
Yeah.
these things as separate and siloed, but we see these as quintessential parts of how we operate as a professional entity, right? And so it's only natural that we are able to kind of disseminate information and talk about these and share ideas and resources around them as to how we go about integrating all this, and then hopefully, being able to provide some good information to practitioners from all over. Like we've had, like I said, coaches from all kinds of sports visit us. We've had coaches from all over the planet visit us, right? So Australia, Korea, Japan, China, India. We've had interns from all over the world. So if you're ever interested in an internship,
Wow.
we've had interns from India. We've had interns from, again, like South Korea. We've had interns from Japan, Switzerland, all over Europe. Yeah, so like again, we view ourselves as kind of the United Nations of track. We're part of a global community, and like I said, we invite anyone to partake.
Man, the key word for me from today's conversation is integration. We talked about integration of athletic training, education, obviously athleticism, coaching. I love that. We talked about integration of your coaching staff that you expressed there at Texas A&M. That's a real cool theme from today. I'm going to recommend prod if you're listening. So if you're listening, 99% chance that you're a track coach. If you haven't checked out Altis for the coaching education side, I highly recommend you go look that up. If you have, so you already know the value that they bring. I'm going to challenge you. I know I focus on track coaches. That's what's made my life where I am today. That's where I'm the hype man for is track coaches. But it behooves us to have better coaches in all of our sports. My kid is probably not going to do track. He's going to do some other sport. Well, I hope that coach knows what the heck they're doing. Not only as far as the X's and O's on how to coach, but how to the whole realm of coaching. We talked about sports psychology, things like that, the whole realm of holistic coaching. So better coaches make us have a better society. So I'm going to prod you, recommend that if you already know the value of Altis, if you don't, go to it, check it out. If you do, I'm going to recommend find another coach, whether it's a track coach or, you guys are all friends with other people in your athletic staff, football coaches, baseball, volleyball and murder or whatever sport that was. I don't know. But
Hurling,
go curling. No, that's Canadian.
hurling.
Hurling. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, I think I did that in college a few times. But I'm gonna just challenge you. That's the word I'm looking for, to spread the word, to have them at least go check it out. There's no harm in at least going to altis.world and seeing what they have to offer. There's a ton of free stuff, which is amazing to me. But have them check it out because again, better coaches will make a better world, a better society.
Yeah, yeah,
Andreas,
absolutely. I would just encourage everyone to check it out. Like I said, free resources. We have a free newsletter. We have a free YouTube channel. We put
oh,
out
the
info on
newsletter,
on
dude,
social media. So yeah,
go sign up
all
for
that stuff is free. And then if you like it, come back and take something else. But that's, start with the free stuff.
go sign up for the newsletter at its basis. If you're listening, you're not, go altus.world, sign up. There's 3 a week and they are, I mean, gold. I mean, I'm not in coaching anymore. I don't coach anymore. And I get the newsletter and it is, I tell you, chef's kiss, man. You guys, I know Stu does a lot of that stuff too, of that writing. You guys, man, valuable, so much valuable in a free freaking newsletter. So at the very, very least, go sign up for that. Andreas, my man, thank you so much. One of the most valuable things that you can give me is your time. And, I'm really grateful for you, man. Your journey is important. I think there is I think a ton of people listening will see the uniqueness of that and see how that can fit into theirs. Patience was another key word I got from your journey, integration and patience. I think, we could all use more of those two tenets in our life. And so I'm so glad that you were able to, up to this point, exemplify them and be able to learn from them as well. So I'm just so grateful for you today sharing your story with us.
Mike, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on. Last shout out to all my mentors that helped, guide me along the journey. Shout out to all the athletes that, I have a coaching partnership with that, also obviously I learned a lot from as well while coaching them. So yeah, appreciate everyone. And yeah, especially you for, sitting down, having this conversation, and hopefully some of you listening find some of these insights valuable.
All right. Appreciate you, man. Thank you guys for being here this week. Again, so grateful for you. Press and play today. Share this with others that would receive value. This may be one that explodes past track and field. Because again, I know we talk track a lot, but this is holistic coaching of athleticism here. So a lot of value for our other sports coaches out there as well. So thanks again for being here. Join us next week. We'll do it all over again and have some fun. Thanks, guys.